In this world,
With every living being you kill,
you can acquire a new ability.
therefore, some powerhouses can even possess tens of thousands of skills simultaneously.
But this man can only have a maximum of 7.
However,
These 7 abilities can evolve infinitely.
very ordinary healing ability directly evolved into an immortal art of limb regeneration. A simple dash skill eventually reached a level capable of tearing through the void. It was precisely because of this ability that,
In my 20s,
managed to rank among humanity's 4 strongest, but even so,
We failed to halt the advancing steps of the demons.
soon, all of humanity across the globe was slaughtered. In the end, only the 4 of us remained.
So completely stop this disaster at its source.
We prepared to use humanity's final trump card.
The time-space crystal of Virginia.
Legend has it that it possesses the power to reverse time and return to the past, but it can only send Owen Person back.
Thus,
Despite starting my training 20 years later than them, was still able to catch up to their pace, making me the best candidate. They believe that if I had been able to tap into my potential earlier back then,
and choose 7 powerful skills in the early stages.
then perhaps I could put an end to this disaster.
but just as I stood on the altar, ready to activate the magic circle,
the church roof was suddenly torn off by a golden dragon.
upon spotting us, it raised its head and began gathering dragon breath in its mouth.
Kaelian told me not to get distracted.
Then he stepped forward, summoning a magic circle to block the attack. Immediately after, he yelled for Iris and Kangtae behind him to switch positions, because he was the only Own who could activate the teleportation circle.
Hearing this,
Iris dodged in a flash and dashed straight toward the golden dragon in the sky. Arriving right below it, she slammed her scepter into the ground. Instantly,
A glowing shield rose up.
following that, Kangtae swung the greatsword in his hands, his whole body emitting searing flames as the greatsword slashed down.
Several lesser dragons lost their lives in an instant.
But before he could even catch his breath, he saw that the golden dragon was completely unscathed. Seeing the dragon's claw swiping towards him, with no time to dodge, he could only raise his sword to block. Instantly, thousands of pounds of crushing pressure spread through his entire body. Seeing this, was about to draw my sword to help,
Kaelian stopped me.
telling me to stay focused. Eris turned back and said to leave this place to them, telling me that once I returned to the past,
Should not be a lone wolf anymore and should try to find some teammates.
Hearing this,
told her I would do my best
Right after.
Kaelian also told,
to avoid unnecessary killing,
But that I must eliminate those who instigate wars.
especially that mad monarch.
Clementine, no matter what.
I had to get rid of that guy.
We, Serenity, as we spoke.
The teleportation circle was almost ready. Sensing the fluctuations, the time-space crystal began to resonate.
The next second,
Magic and crystal merged, and the circle activated successfully. Seeing this as they looked back,
The two fighting at the front
had their tense expressions replaced by relief. When I opened my eyes again, found myself in the middle of a crowd, looked up and observed this incredibly familiar scene around me, finally confirming that I had truly time-traveled successfully.
At this moment,
The people around me were still in a state of chaotic commotion. Looking at the unfamiliar surroundings, they had no idea what was going on. It was perfectly normal for them to panic like this. After all, they had just fallen into the alternate world. Around this time, people had just started mysteriously disappearing in the real world. Back then, it was only after being teleported to this world that I realized all the missing people had ended up here,
This world.
existing in an intermediate zone, deeply influenced by the abyss, formed by devouring other dimensions. Those who arrived in the alternate world early were able to learn special abilities a step ahead of others, allowing them to roam here practically unhindered. Moreover, every corner of this place, swarming with all kinds of strange beasts. Once all of humanity is teleported to this world, the gate of the abyss will open.
The Great War started from that very moment.
Thinking of this, checked my own body,
and found that my previous skills and various
physical stats had indeed been completely wiped clean. Now had about 5 years left to grow stronger. However, that guy should be appearing around this time too.
Right.
just as I finished that thought.
A crack tore open in the sky. Then,
A pitch-black entity started emerging from it.
once it fully crawled out, the crowd could clearly see that it was a creature resembling a little demon. It introduced itself, saying it was a little helper fairy,
Here to assist everyone in speeding up their progress.
however, knew exactly what it meant by speeding up progress. It actually meant drastically reducing our numbers through infighting. Following that, the little fairy first welcomed everyone to this strange world. But before it could utter its next sentence, it was interrupted. A man told it to cut the crap and send him home immediately. Hearing this, the fairy's expression instantly darkened, telling him to let it finish speaking first. The man was terrified and did not dare make another sound.
The little fairy then continued.
Saying this place.
Will grant everyone infinite freedom
Have you ever fantasized about a world
without legal systems.
Ethics.
Or morality.
Well, here,
You can do whatever you want.
not only that, but even the physical limitations that have always
Bound the human body have disappeared.
from now on, you can grow infinitely stronger according to your own will, just like those figures you call heroes in your movies.
Now, we'll give you a quick demonstration.
As it snapped its fingers, the body of the man who had interrupted it earlier instantly exploded. This gory scene left the surrounding people in shock, too terrified to even breathe. The little fairy then resumed its smiling face, saying it disliked people who talked too much and were too noisy. After a brief moment of dead silence, people began fleeing frantically in all directions. However, with each snap of the fairy's fingers, the bodies of those screaming and running away blew up one after another. The fairy roared in anger, saying it had already warned them that it hated noisy people.
Hearing this,
The survivors quickly covered their mouths, not daring to make the slightest sound.
the next second,
The fairy reverted to its original cheerful look.
Saying that here, as long as you kill a living being or anything else,
runes will drop.
saying so,
It extracted a white stone out of someone's corpse. Then explained that besides this
There are 8 other similar stones, all of which drop randomly, although this one in front of me is a lowest grade white rune.
As long as you all work hard to grow in the future.
You can obtain better runes.
The little fairy held the rune up, inspected it,
And said, this is a rune that increases strength.
it then asked if anyone wanted it.
Hearing this,
The crowd quickly backed away, terrified of upsetting this little creature, but at that moment, pushed through the crowd, stepped forward,
And raised my hand.
looking at the rune before me. Could not help but sigh that it had truly been a long time since I used on of these.
The little fairy was taken aback for a moment.
Then flew over to me and said, "Excellent. Everyone should actively participate just like me." Then told me to hold out my hand.
And asked if it felt magical right now?
Runes twist the laws of physics to boost your power. From a scientific standpoint,
With your original,
Strength.
you could only lift 117 kilograms, but now it is increased to 122 kilograms. Not only that, runes can also, but before it could finish, it abruptly stopped because it noticed I did not look curious or excited at all. Then it continued,
Saying anyway.
"Runes have different effects based on their types.
So,
The more runes you acquire,
The stronger your personal power will become.
The only way to survive is
to continuously collect runes to make yourself stronger." Soon as these words were spoken,
The fear
on people's faces was entirely replaced by greed.
The very next second.
They began scrambling madly to snatch the runes that had just dropped on the ground, but the fairy sucked those runes back into its hands, saying it would keep these runes for itself, and that they should go find new ones. This left those who were just about to grab a rune greatly disappointed. Then it added that just by touching your right ear,
you can open your personal status panel.
to view the runes you already own.
After saying so,
Everyone gave it a try, and found that a panel really did pop up.
The fairy added that humanity's
Initial base stats average around 10.
took a look.
after just using that rune,
Me strength had increased slightly. Immediately after,
the fairy said that to help everyone adapt to this place as quickly as possible,
it would hand out some perks. Then, everyone suddenly felt heavy weight in their hands.
raising their hands.
They realized a weapon had appeared out of nowhere. After announcing the end of the beginner's tutorial, the fairy vanished on the spot. Suddenly, someone shouted.
look behind us.
Everyone turned around and found a horde of goblins not far away. These goblins looked exceptionally excited upon seeing humans.
Those who sensed something was wrong had already
Started turning around and running toward the back of the crowd. When these goblins got a bit closer, everyone finally got a clear look at their grotesque faces. Girl said,
do not provoke
Them.
"Let us just slowly back away." But before they could take 2 steps, the people in the back row suddenly stopped. The crowd looked back and discovered
To their shock.
that an invisible wall had blocked their retreat. This immediately sent everyone into a panic. More importantly,
this wall.
was actually constantly closing in on them, and the wall behind the goblins opposite them was closing in as well. Suddenly, someone noticed a door on the side that seemed to be an exit. They also noticed a number displayed on the door. When own person ran through the exit,
The number on the door changed to 48.
instantly, people realized that this
door might only allow 50 people to escape.
They began sprinting madly towards the door. Seeing this, only found it laughable. If 100 people banded together to fight, their chances of winning would actually be quite high. During my previous life when I was here, 40 people died at the hands of these goblins.
But things are different now.
Must quickly take care of these.
Goblins, so I can proceed to the next stage.
At this moment,
The goblins sensed the humans'
cowardice.
and started charging over.
Immediately.
Agonizing screams rang out from the crowd. Just as I killed another was already leaping over my head.
seeing this,
Grabbed its wrist first, then sliced it clean in half with on stroke. This scene caught the attention of the surrounding goblins, deliberately struck a combat-ready stance, intimidating the other goblins into holding back. Only then did I sigh, realizing this body from decades ago was far too sluggish to use.
Was already feeling a bit tired after killing just 2 goblins.
However, my luck was not too bad this time. My agility increased by 0.1. You see, with an increase in agility, my reaction speed would correspondingly improve.
just then,
A goblin behind me took advantage of my blind spot and threw a dagger at me, but having just boosted my agility, heard the whistling sound and swiftly turned my head.
while dodging the strike,
Hurled my own short sword right back at it.
The next second,
The blade precisely pierced its head, taking its life. Seeing me kill their comrades one after another, 3 goblins decided to team up and attack me together.
But in my eyes,
They had already become nothing more than floating runes. I dashed swiftly past them. The 3 of them collapsed to the ground before they could even react. Although all my physical stats had been wiped clean, my combat experience and memories from my past life were still intact. When the others saw me slaughtering several goblins in a row, they were dumbfounded. But this also made them realize that these monsters could indeed be killed.
thus,
The battle between the 2 sides officially began.
threw myself into the fray.
Rapidly, butchering the goblins in front of me. Actually, there was no need to rush so frantically from the start, but I could not afford to waste time here, because there were already many humans existing in this world. Newcomers all receive a 3-month beginner's protection period.
As long as they stay in the designated zones.
They won't encounter veteran players, but after 3 months, they would have to face those.
Who had 2 or 3 years of survival experience?
So I had to use this time to grow stronger quickly. Kaelian sending me back to this specific point in time was truly the absolute best choice.
In no time at all,
The battle came to an end. Looking at the corpses surrounding me, the others could not believe that I, alone,
had actually killed more than half of the monsters.
at that moment,
the little fairy reappeared. It took a look and praised my side for getting such a great score, noting that our numbers had been reduced quite nicely. With that said, It removed the surrounding invisible walls.
and retreated back into the void rift.
Only after it left did the crowd dare to curse out loud into thin air. Then, opened my status panel to check and found that my starting attributes this time were far stronger than in my past life.
Had also acquired a weapon.
Next up was figuring out how to get stronger rapidly. Remembered Kalian mentioning in my past life that there was a hidden dungeon within the tutorial area.
And its difficulty was purgatory level.
Back then,
However,
He could not make it to the end.
and he believed that no On could
possibly clear that dungeon during the beginner phase.
He then added that even so,
He still reaped massive rewards from it. Being a member of the Valkyries now was entirely thanks to that dungeon.
He also said that if he could return to the past,
he would absolutely conquer that dungeon first.
That way, he might have been able to defeat me. Thinking of this, got ready to head out and find that hidden dungeon.
But I needed to take care of own thing first.
That was to go find what Kalian had once told me about.
The 2 hidden shards stashed inside the tutorial zone.
Just as I was about to head out towards.
The location of the first shard.
Suddenly heard an argument breaking out behind me. It seemed a girl was being harassed by a group of men.
The men.
Using the guise of we must unite.
To survive.
Were trying to force the woman to stay.
Meanwhile,
The woman's companions behind her, seeing the other side's
Overwhelming numbers.
did not dare step forward to help.
However,
Had no interest in meddling in such trivial matters, because the hidden shards would automatically disappear after a week.
Had to get my hands on them before that happened.
suddenly, a guy behind me.
Called out my name, turned around and asked if he knew me.
Hearing my response,
The 2 guys were visibly shocked. The guy with blonde hair stepped forward and asked if I had gone crazy.
Before being teleported here,
Were not we just hanging out together?
hearing this,
my brain started working in overdrive.
finally,
A minute later, remembered that they were my classmates.
In my past life,
We were hanging out when we got teleported here. Back then, they died right in the first
Round.
which is why I could not remember them. In this life, because I had slaughtered,
Most of the goblins.
they managed to survive.
the girl.
Upon seeing me, forcefully shook off the man's grip, turned around, and ran straight towards me. Compared to them,
Recognized Yumihi at a single glance.
seeing this, the group of men wanted to step forward and use force. But when they got a clear look at my face, they stopped in their tracks because their leader clearly remembered the scene of me, single-handedly taking down a horde of goblins. But on second thought, he figured I might be completely exhausted by now.
so
He subtly gave his underlings a look. After they walked up and surrounded us, he declared that he was definitely taking Yumihi today. Simply walked up to him and, with an
60 tone.
told him to say that one more time,
Feeling my intense murderous intent.
He was frightened into subconsciously taking 2 steps back.
strode forward and directly shoved him aside. Turning back around, his veins popped out as he prepared to attack.
In response,
Pulled out my short sword and asked if he had something to say.
Just then,
Their boss walked over.
Claiming they were not bad guys. He suggested we tag along with them.
after all, there is safety in numbers.
It was not hard to tell from this man's eyes that he had already adapted to the rules here. His previously hidden true nature,
Having lost all restraints.
allowed scum like him to thrive like a fish in water. Just as I gripped my dagger tight.
intending to wipe them out, suddenly recalled Kalian telling me to avoid unnecessary killing.
Andrew, he's telling me not to be a lone wolf and try to find some teammates.
Thinking of this, suppressed my killing intent.
Even if I left them be.
Guys like them would bring about their own ruin soon enough.
Fuss.
Turned around and walked away from the spot. The underling wanted to charge forward, but was stopped by his boss. Because what the boss wanted was to establish their own order here.
After this incident,
The blonde guy felt that in this place, humans were scarier than goblins. Then, he shifted his gaze towards me. He felt that I was drastically different from before. Previously, seeing me an orphan always sitting in the corner zoning out, he assumed I was just a weakling.
now.
He ran up to me and asked.
Why?
I pretended not to know them just now.
Faced with this question,
Did not know how to answer for a moment. In the end, had to make up an excuse.
saying I had amnesia.
Then, glanced at Yumihi beside me, although she had lived quite comfortably in the real world before. Here,
Beauty was a double-edged sword.
after I led them along for a while,
The blonde girl behind me could not help but ask where we were going.
Yumihi was also quite curious.
said,
We are already here.
"Look for yourselves." Everyone looked up and realized we had arrived at a subway entrance. This was the location where the first hidden shard could be obtained.
Gangnam Station.
Yumihi then asked what I was bringing them here for.
Thought to myself, explaining things to them was truly a hassle. If it were not for what Iris had said,
Definitely would have continued as a lone wolf.
left with no choice. Just told them that although I lost my memory, had gained superpowers as a result.
So,
My senses told me there was good stuff down there. Considering all sorts of monsters existed now, me claim of having superpowers should sound perfectly reasonable.
Right.
The blonde girl behind me heard this and asked her male companion,
Is it really okay to just follow him like this?
hearing this,
turned around and told them they did not have to follow me, preferred to respect personal choice.
even if you just stand back and watch from now on.
It does not matter.
Hearing my arrogant reply made the blonde guy extremely annoyed.
but they figured I actually knew what I was doing.
So, after some hesitation, they decided to follow me anyway. Sensing the growing eerie atmosphere, the blonde guy ran up and asked if we were heading somewhere safe now. Told him no, right now. We are going to meet some friends who have lived here for a long time. Hearing this, the blonde's face was full of disbelief. After all,
Who would live in a place like this?
after walking a bit further, suddenly stopped in my tracks, then drew the short sword from my back before anyone could react. Swung the blade right at Taesung,
The blonde guy.
then, under everyone's horrified gazes, sliced a worm right at Taesung's feet in half.
And Taesung.
Terrified by my sudden move, did not even dare to breathe. Told them these were green worms. They pop out once they sense vibrations coming from the ground.
If you get bitten by them,
Losing a chunk of flesh is getting off easy. After explaining this to them, picked up the rune that the green worm had dropped afterwards. Taught them a simple method to get rid of the green worms. That is to watch the ground.
If you see the dirt bulging anywhere,
Just stab straight down.
Once they learned this trick, it felt as easy as playing whack-a-mole.
The guy with the headphones?
However,
hesitated to strike.
just then, a patch of dirt behind him slowly bulged into a large mound. The next second, a green worm burst out and lunged at him. Luckily,
Noticed in time.
quickly dashed over and pushed him aside. Then, with 2 simple slashes,
Chop the green worm to pieces.
Tae-sung walked over and asked how I knew all this. Simply turned back and told him it was my superpower. Hearing this, the group was half skeptical.
only you, me, he looked at me with eyes full of admiration.
After hunting for a while longer, the ground was littered with dropped runes. As I bent down to pick them up, noticed they were just standing behind me, so I turned around and asked why they were not picking any up.
You, me, he said they thought it would be better if I absorbed these runes to level up.
And then protect them.
Because even if they absorbed these runes right now, they would not become instantly strong like me. Sighed and explained to them that
Runes obtained through your own strength must be absorbed by yourself.
If you want to continue traveling with me,
You must at least follow this rule.
this rule was the fundamental law set by those in my past life.
Who had wandered the abyss for decades.
Just so companions could coexist.
To reduce unnecessary conflicts, whoever kills the prey owns the dropped gear
Items.
and runes.
If it is a group hunt,
They are distributed based on contribution and priority. Because relationships built in this environment like a leaky boat that could capsize at any moment. This is a harsh truth they would come to understand before long, said. The thing you should trust the most is your own ability.
If you are dead weight,
You will definitely be abandoned.
That is simply the rule of this world.
After listening to what I just said,
A shudder went through their hearts. After nodding to each other in agreement, they started searching the ground for dropped runes.
and I was very well aware that
Once, they got used to this place in a while.
They would go absolutely crazy just to get runes. Right then, Tae-sung suddenly picked up a purple rune. He instinctively felt that this rune was anything but simple. The panel stated that this rune was called the essence of the Acro Troll tribe. Thinking of something, he suddenly turned and looked at me warily. Although I had just straightforwardly said we would split things fairly, if I wanted to snatch this rune from him now,
he likely would not be a match for me.
so... Hay hesitantly probed, asking if this rune really belonged to him now, but to his surprise, simply nodded in agreement without hesitation. This rune is indeed quite good in the early stages.
Once absorbed,
It provides the player with much needed defense and regeneration for survival. Plus, since this rune acts like a passive skill, it is actually quite highly sought after, although it drastically increases the user's appetite. Food can simply be robbed from others once you're stronger. Skills and proficiency levels in this world.
area determined by the rank of the runes.
Therefore, for powerful individuals with abundant mana, having hundreds of skills is not surprising at all. For example,
The Kalian I knew in my past life.
possessed over 1,000 skills. However, in this regard, I'm vastly different from others. Back then, also tried to absorb more runes, but later on, every attempt ended in failure.
Ares also tried many methods to help me.
And the final conclusion was that I could only absorb exactly 7. She said if she had known earlier,
she would have
made me learn much more powerful skills.
While this was my fatal weakness,
It was also an unparalleled advantage because it allowed my 7 skills to evolve infinitely. What started as just an essence of the Dororo lizard that gave me minor regeneration eventually evolved to the point where it had the exact same effect as Kang Tae's immortal art. What started as a simple quick dash skill, in the end, literally reached a level capable of tearing through the void. Back then, they gave me the nickname 7 Stars. It was precisely because of this ability that even though I started 20 years later than them, was still able to catch up to their footsteps and even surpass them. This was the main reason they ultimately chose me to return to the past. So, in this life, absolutely cannot make any mistakes.
Ares once said that I must strictly
Select and then learn these 7 skills. Meanwhile,
Seeing I had no objections.
Tae-sung began to absorb it.
The next second.
A prompt appeared on his panel.
Physical resistance stat has increased.
Acro Troll Essence.
Current proficiency, 1%.
specialization.
Bone fortification.
Current proficiency, 1%.
specialization.
Gluttony. Current proficiency, 1%. Current proficiency, 1%. Without a word,
He quickly opened his status panel to check,
and found that his other stats had also increased. This made him secretly think I was a total idiot to actually give away such top-tier loot to someone else. He believed that at this rate,
He would definitely surpass me.
following that, led them further underground.
This made he very curious.
And she asked me,
Why we were still heading further down?
told her we were going to take the subway. She then asked if subways were still running in a world like this. Simply said, you will see when we get there.
The reason I was so certain was because
That guy's intel was never wrong.
In my past life,
When we were discussing how to get stronger quickly, that guy came over and said relying solely on dungeons was not enough. He then told us that in the beginner tutorial zone, there was an item we absolutely had to obtain, and that item spawned inside the subway. Although the location and layout of every station are different, every single subway station has a 3rd basement level. If you pass through the portal in the middle of the stairs,
and go down to the very bottom floor.
you will find a subway train that has never departed. If you can manage to board that train,
You succeed.
however, the process to get on it is extremely difficult.
according to that guy, the subway will only stay there for own day.
Therefore,
I had to secure the hidden shard within today.
when we got down there, we found portal right in front of us.
Just as expected.
Seeing this,
He asked if we were really going in.
it looked incredibly dangerous inside. Always.
Replied that I came here following my instincts.
If anyone wanted to turn back,
They could leave at any time, having tasted the benefits.
Tae-sung did not.
Even think twice before saying he was going in. Immediately after, Yu Mi-hee also quickly stated she wanted to go. Looking at her anxious expression, figured she must have finally realized it.
Girl, as pretty as her would.
Encounter far more dangers in the future.
If she wanted to survive.
The only way was to get stronger. The blonde girl and her male companion chose to stay behind and hunt here. Meanwhile,
The headphones guy said in a very low
voice that he wanted to go down together too.
Hearing this,
Tae-sung mocked him.
Asking what he was going down there for. Were not you just too scared to even move a moment ago? The headphones guy looked up and retorted that it was none of his business.
Whatever decision I make has nothing to do with you.
Tae-sung felt his authority being challenged, so he angrily yelled that he had just leached so much XP, adding that if they met with danger,
He would not look out for him like this time.
right then, interrupted them and told them to stop arguing.
time is running out.
Figure it out yourselves? With that said,
Started walking towards the portal.
The headphones guy and Yu Mi-hee closely followed right behind me.
Tae-sung gnashed his teeth in the back.
secretly cursing us as bastards.
for daring to ignore him like this in front of Mihi,
Nevertheless,
he still trailed behind us and stepped into the portal.
When I saw the convenience store,
Inside?
Thought to myself, it really is here.
according to what that guy said,
The B2 level of every subway station.
Has some sort of reward mechanism resembling a convenience store. While Tae-sung was looking around for weapons for self-defense, walked over to the kitchen supply section and found a pot among the items. Seeing this, Mihi came over and asked what I was doing, set up the pot, took out a leather pouch, and said,
Cooking.
Then she asked me what was inside the pouch.
I said.
This is green worm.
blood.
Poured it into the pot.
At the time,
She was still wondering why I collected this stuff.
Following that,
Took out goblin skin, preparing to toss it in as well. Goblins evolved a poison over a long time to resist green worms. By simply mixing the two, and even more potent poison could be created.
Tae-sung.
Who was nearby saw me cooking and
Ran over to ask if he could have a bite.
when I told him it was a highly lethal poison, he was so startled he immediately leaped 2.5 meters back.
Yu Mi-hee did not expect me to know even these things.
and asked how I managed to do it.
S always just brushed it off, saying it was because of my superpower.
the relevant knowledge just naturally
Pops up in my head, but what they did not know was that to learn
All this knowledge.
had suffered immensely back in the day. Kaelian once said that no matter who returned to the past, without proper intelligence, ranking up would still be extremely difficult. Therefore, intelligence is of the utmost importance. He also strictly warned us to always remember not to share this intelligence with anyone else, because introducing these futuristic pieces of knowledge would only accelerate the speed of the abyss's corruption. However, it had been so long, and I had not studied it carefully back then, so I had actually forgotten the exact proportions of this recipe and the required heating time. But as I looked at the clump,
Of sludge in the pot.
figured it should be fine.
Thinking so.
Dumped out the body wash from a bottle on the shelf, and then poured the poison into the empty body wash bottle.
This way, it would be very convenient to apply.
Seeing this,
Yu Mi-hee?
behind me asked,
If they could use the stuff too.
Hearing me say yes.
they felt a surge of joy in their hearts.
But the very next second.
I added,
On and strength rune for 2 applications.
Hearing this, Tae-sung cursed me for being despicable, saying I was taking advantage of the situation to extort them, then explained that I could just give it to them for free. But in the long run,
That was not a good choice.
because I know better than anyone that own-sided, purely giving relationships are very prone to shattering. Hearing this,
Yu Mi-hee asked if she could use a little bit first.
And pay me back after she hunted some runes later.
Hearing her out.
handed the body wash bottle full of poison over to her, also reminded her to be careful and not get it on her hands.
Otherwise, it would hurt like hell.
Immediately after, the other two stepped forward and agreed to the exact same terms. While they were dividing it up and coating their weapons, turned around and began gathering some necessary supplies. After packing them, stuffed them into a small backpack, but when I saw that they had packed several entire boxes, warned them, asking if they wanted to act as bait. Besides, if you sweep the place clean like this,
You will definitely be targeted by others. So leave some behind.
also taught them to bury some of their
Unnecessary items in the dirt.
After hearing these words,
Yu Mi-hee's.
admiration for me grew even stronger.
At the same time,
She wondered when she would be able to possess superpowers just like me.
You have to realize.
There's a possibility they might.
Be stuck in this world forever from now on, if she wanted to survive. She had to seize every second to hunt monsters and level up.
And currently,
The fastest and safest way to level up was to stick with me. Thinking of this, she quickly got up and hurried to catch up with my pace.
Seeing Yu Mi-hee walking so closely to me.
Made Tae-sung.
Who had a crush on her. Extremely irritated,
following that,
he first tossed his heavy bag,
To the headphones guy?
telling him to sort it out for him. Then he caught up to me and asked if they could also acquire the kind of superpowers I had. Looked back and told them.
Maybe.
Hearing this,
The three of them instantly turned serious and asked if I was for real. When they heard my affirmative answer, their faces were instantly filled with absolute joy.
and I was not actually lying to them.
It is said that among the people who arrived in the alternate world, there was indeed a minority who awakened special abilities that did not exist in the real world. However, what they did not know was that these ability users were often the most dangerous ones. They would resort to any means necessary against those around them just to grow stronger.
Just then,
Tae-sung walked over again and asked.
why I was always so aloof and quiet.
As I turned to walk away, told them that I was just used to it. After all, in the past, There was no need to talk so much, because in the final 5 years before I traveled back in time, we had to face the monsters swarming out of the abyss every single day. It was precisely then that humanity realized its own insignificance,
and hope gradually twisted into utter despair.
listening to my words.
Tae-sung just thought I was acting edgy and showing off.
He thought to himself that if I did not have that,
Superpower.
He would not have to listen to me at all.
however, he figured that as long as he followed for a bit longer, once he got stronger himself,
He could just ditch me and take Yumi-He to fly solo.
before he could finish his thought, suddenly reached out and stopped the group, crouched down and noticed a puddle of slime on the ground.
Closely inspected the type of slime.
It should not belong to a blade snail.
Furthermore,
It lacked a sour stench and organ fragments, so it was not from a ghoul either.
Based on my deduction,
this was highly
Likely left behind by a land mermaid. Although these monsters move quite slowly, they can secrete a toxin that induces rapid paralysis.
Once you fall into their hands,
Being
Torn to pieces is just a matter of seconds.
However,
Had already come up with a countermeasure.
first.
Led them to gather a bunch of empty beer bottles.
then.
We crafted them into Molotov cocktails.
although we did not have gasoline here.
We could substitute it with other flammable and explosive materials.
at this moment,
Tae-sung came over to provoke me again.
Saying that compared to our original world, must prefer it here.
Right.
After all, in this place, you can do whatever you want. He then added that if he had superpowers, before he could finish,
locked my icy gaze onto him.
if Kalian were here,
He would have killed this guy without a moment's hesitation.
but Ares, who had saved countless lives, would have stepped in to stop it. In the end, let out a sigh, and decided to let it go. Then, explained our upcoming battle plan to them.
One person will stay in front to throw the Molotov cocktails?
And the remaining 3 will move in to finish off the targets.
Of course.
Whoever fights on the absolute front line.
Holds the priority right to distribute the runes.
Upon hearing this,
Tae-sung eagerly.
Volunteered.
saying he would take the front line. When I asked who would throw the Molotov cocktails,
You, me, he, and the headphones guy both raised their hands simultaneously.
So.
told the 2 of them to discuss it and pick one person.
Being stared at by Yumi-he.
The headphones guy broke out in a cold sweat. He thought to himself that it would not be good to fight with Mai-he over this, but he was also absolutely terrified of getting up close and personal with those monsters. Seeing that they could not reach a conclusion after forever, simply told them to take turns throwing. The Serenities, we walked deeper into the dark.
The headphones guy grew increasingly terrified.
But at this point,
You could not just say he wanted to go back.
he could not help but wonder.
Were not the rest of us scared at all? He looked up and noticed that Yumi-he, walking in front of him, was also trembling uncontrollably. Just as he was starting to feel a little more balanced mentally, leading at the very front, suddenly stopped and told him to stay on high alert.
They are coming.
Soon as my voice dropped,
A rustling sound of flesh dragging against the ground echoed from the shadows ahead, then told me he to throw a Molotov cocktail first, toward the direction of the sound.
Although Yumi-he was scared half to death at this moment,
She kept telling herself internally to be strong when the Molotov cocktail left her hand and arcs through the pitch black darkness. The sudden flash of light starkly illuminated a hideous and terrifying face as the bottle hit the ground and shattered.
Spraying accelerant everywhere.
An intense blaze instantly erupted, roasting that monster crisp on the outside and tender on the inside. Next, drew my weapon and told Tae-sung to follow me in to land the killing blows. Reminded him to be extremely careful not to touch the paralyzing poison they had applied. With that said, lunged forward.
finishing off Own with a single slash.
Then spun around to deliver another strike, successfully securing 2 runes. Meanwhile,
Tae-sung,
Who was spacing out on the side?
Was startled awake by a monster suddenly pouncing at him.
in his panic, hurriedly swung his blade wildly.
Unfortunately,
He did not hit any vital spots at all.
but to his surprise,
Even a shallow cut like that rapidly drained the life out of the monster. This made him marvel internally at how incredibly
effective the poison I had crafted truly was.
Just grazing the enemy's skin was enough to be fatal.
Seeing this, asked him if the poison I gave him was well worth the price of those runes. But he was still deeply immersed in his excitement.
He genuinely believed that with this weapon,
He could easily surpass me soon.
Then, over the course of the following time,
Yumi-he continuously tossed Molotov cocktails.
toward the areas where the monsters were clustered, any stragglers that slipped through the cracks or monsters that tried to approach was swiftly decapitated as I stepped up,
Tae-sung stayed right by my side.
landing the finishing blows.
The current situation played out exactly as I had anticipated.
The paralyzing slime of these monsters was highly flammable. Therefore, nothing was more effective against them than Molotov cocktails. After I had been hacking at them for a while, noticed the weapon in my hand had noticeably dulled.
Fortunately,
With the potent enhancement of the poison,
a light scratch was more than enough to deal with them.
Tae-sung,
Standing beside me.
Felt as if he were playing a video game.
the more he killed, the more pumped he got.
Right at that moment.
He noticed 2 more runes drop nearby. Without a second thought, he bent down and reached out to grab them. Consequently,
He did not notice a monster in the
shadows nearby spitting venom at him.
Fortunately,
His reflexes were quick enough to let the venom splash onto his pants instead.
in an instant,
The fabric began to corrode, but the terrifying part was that behind the
attacking monster.
many more eyes suddenly lit up, seeing this.
He frantically shouted for,
Yumi-he to throw a Molotov cocktail.
But when she opened her bag to check, she found they were all out of Molotovs.
helpless.
She had to call for Sang-jin.
The headphones guy, to switch places with her. He was to continue throwing the firebombs,
But a nervous Sang-jin tried.
several times without catching a flame on his lighter. By the time the lighter finally flickered to life, it illuminated a horrific face right at his feet. This startled him so much that he fumbled,
Dropping both the Molotov and the lighter.
watching this mess,
Tae-sung's anger flared instantly.
he turned and began cursing, Sang-jin out.
Luckily,
Arrived just in time to deliver a slash, preventing the monster at Sang-jin's feet from touching him. Told them to calm down.
As long as we stuck to the plan,
there would be no issues. With that, turned back to the battlefield, telling them to take a rest for a while.
After this, you will be responsible for the cleanup and collecting runes.
Hearing this, everyone collapsed to the ground, panting heavily, thanks to the healing rune he got earlier. Tae-sung's wounds had already fully closed, told him that once his stamina stat reached a certain level, his injuries would heal even faster. Then, told him to take his share of the runes.
He stood up,
looking at the runes with a hint of dissatisfaction. Then, his gaze shifted towards Sang-jin.
He could not help but think that if he also
Absorbed Sang-jin's share as well.
his growth speed would be even faster. With that thought, he walked towards Sang-jin, asking how he could be so ungrateful before Sang-jin could react.
Tae-sung grabbed him in a chokehold.
The frail Sang-jin was completely helpless against him,
Tae-sung sneered, saying he could not even throw a Molotov right.
and almost got him killed just now.
Sang-jin wanted to argue that it was actually because
Tae-sung was trying to hoard the runes for himself,
but as Tae-sung's grip
tightened. He found himself unable to speak,
Yu Mi-hee rushed forward.
pleading for Tae-sung to let go, warning that Sang-jin might actually die.
Having asserted his dominance,
Tae-sung tossed him aside like trash, but just as he reached for Sang-jin's share of runes, throwing knife suddenly thudded into the ground before him.
Told Tae-sung.
Those do not belong to you.
Tae-sung retorted. Giving these runes to this coward
It's no different from throwing them in the trash.
honestly,
There is no difference whether this guy is here or not.
We just end up having to look after him.
He then proposed that we split the runes evenly between us, simply replied that since we had an agreement,
The distribution must be fair.
Do not touch what is not yours.
Knowing he was no match for me.
Tae-sung stood up in a huff and walked away. Then, told Sang-jin that he must learn
How to protect what belongs to him.
at this point,
Yu Mi-hee hesitated before stepping forward to ask.
if I found them annoying or a burden. She had realized that even alone could easily handle those swarms of monsters, reassured her, saying that was not the case.
I am not going to judge you for things
You are not experienced in yet.
She then asked if I would continue to lead them, saying she felt like I might leave at any moment.
Did not turn around.
just told her.
Whether you can
Keep up or not, that is up to you.
But all three of you did.
quite well.
So do not worry.
While clearing the battlefield, notice that the dropped runes were primarily for stamina and strength.
In the early stages,
Stamina and
Strength are vital attributes.
so
The harvest this time was quite good. Then opened my status panel.
to check my strength and stamina stats.
The total value was nearing 50.
once I absorbed on more and reached 50,
That little pixie from before suddenly appeared,
He congratulated me.
saying my total strength and stamina
some had exceeded 75.
thus,
had achieved an initial milestone.
immediately.
He recognized me as the person.
Who had reached out and demanded a rune last time?
Then, he began buzzing incessantly in my ear. He said they have always liked hardworking strivers, so they give small rewards to the most active people.
Yu Mi-hee then stepped forward.
Trembling, asking if this was unfair. After all,
Everyone's physical abilities were different from the very start.
so we are not all starting from the same baseline.
The pixie first told her not to be so afraid of him.
because we pixies do not.
Attack players at the very beginning,
Nor do we kill players just because we are annoyed.
though there are always exceptions.
Would not you agree?
Perhaps you might even be that exception yourself.
seeing Yu Mi-hee turn pale with fright,
He clutched his stomach and laughed.
Saying he was joking. Then he asked her,
Why would someone
As smart as you say something like that.
Don't not you have traits that are superior to others?
But you have not erased your superior parts.
just to be exactly the same as everyone else?
Have you?
there's no such thing as fairness in life. With that, he skipped back to
My side.
saying it was time for the reward. Already knew what it was. For the first person to exceed 50 in a stat.
The reward is choosing 3 desired runes.
the pixie asked me what I wanted.
With a snap of his fingers, a recovery rune appeared.
How about this?
He asked, even though it is a single-use item, with this, even if your
Stomach is pierced.
you can recover instantly.
It could be considered a revival skill.
The others were shocked to hear how powerful the rune was,
The three of them thought in unison.
if they were in mortal danger.
Would surely choose the recovery rune to save them?
However,
I knew it would be useless if
limbs were completely severed.
so.
Asked the pixie.
Do you have any magic resistance runes?
The pixie clearly did not expect me to ask that.
Nonetheless.
he summoned several
Runes from a magic circle and said,
Of course.
This deeply disappointed the other three.
While recovery runes are great,
Unless they are high-tier ones like those Kangtae found.
they have their limits. However,
Magic and physical resistance. Runes are absolutely unobtainable in the tutorial zone. Increasing stamina only helps with activity and recovery speed, but physical and magic resistance are the core of actual defense and resilience. General physical attacks can be dodged with movement and experience,
But magical attacks are not.
nearly as easy to evade. After using the runes, checked my panel. My magic resistance had reached 13. This would at least prevent me from
Dying instantly when hit by magic.
Having completed its task.
the pixie prepared to leave.
before going.
She told me she had high expectations.
And urged me to keep it up. Finally.
She blew me a kiss and called me handsome Appa.
This scene completely floored the three behind me. They never imagined this terrifying. Pixie was actually female. Seeing their expressions, snapped.
What are you looking at?
Move out. As time went on, everyone lost their initial awkwardness and fear. With the help of the earlier rune boosts, things felt much easier than before. Then, she noticed me crouching on the ground again.
She thought I was making more poison.
But she soon realized my speed.
Had not changed at all compared to before.
Knowing I had collected the most runes.
She stepped forward and asked why. After absorbing so many, my speed was still the same.
Rolled up my sleeve.
Showed her my arm.
And said it was because of this. They looked at the rune,
Patterns on my wrist and asked what they were.
explained that runes can actually be collected.
By focusing on the runes you want to store.
They will be saved as these.
Patterns etched onto your arm.
When they asked how I knew this, gave my usual answer.
I know because of my superpower.
You, Mihi, immediately wanted to try it too.
Stood up and said,
Learning this won't benefit you.
Doing this prevents your strength from
Rising quickly.
And your hunting speed will slow down.
And if you're killed,
It is all for nothing.
because runes collected this way will drop in their entirety once you lose your life.
Sang Jin asked in confusion.
Then why collect them this way at all?
Told them it was for trading with others later. Knew well that while it had not happened yet, an order would slowly emerge after the tutorial.
At that point,
Runes would replace currency for trading.
Finally.
Advised them to use every rune they found on themselves instead of hoarding them.
Tae-sung asked petulantly if I was looking down on them.
If you can do it,
Why can't we?
Hearing him.
Sighed and thought to myself.
What a guy with zero self-awareness.
It seemed I would have to lead them through a few more hardships before they woke up. But before that,
Needed to.
Organize and update my gear.
thinking this,
called them over and said,
Listen up.
Whether you choose to follow me down or stay here to hunt is up to you.
but while you are here,
You must follow my orders.
now.
hand over all your weapons.
Tae-sung asked.
Why on earth should I give my weapon to you?
Besides,
Do not you already have on?
Threw my sword on the ground.
This own is dull.
I need some spares.
Tae-sung asked if I took their swords.
What were they supposed to use?
Are you expecting us to just hide behind you and watch you kill monsters? Sang Jin thought this was a great idea and immediately,
said he would give me his weapon.
however, he was sharply silenced by Tae-sung. Seeing Tae-sung's firm stance, asked if he planned to join the fight on the next floor.
Feeling strong.
Tae-sung said I was still underestimating them. This made him very annoyed.
so
He was definitely going.
Thought to myself that once they saw what was,
down there.
They might change their minds.
But if they went,
would inevitably have to get distracted looking after them.
finally.
Gave them two choices.
First,
Would not go and they could go alone. Second, they could come but not participate, simply staying back and watching me fight. Sang Jin was the first to speak, choosing the second option.
You, me, he followed suit and also chose the second option.
She believed that if I said such a thing, it meant whatever was below was extremely dangerous.
Tae-sung tried to convince her.
Because it is dangerous.
We should fight together.
That selfish guy clearly.
Wants to abandon his friends.
So he can hog all the rewards for himself.
He figured Sang Jin was a weakling who did not matter.
But if you, Mihi, did not go?
No O-An would see him show off.
Thought to myself that Tae-sung was lucky. It was me who was reborn, not Kalian.
otherwise,
He would have been blown to bits, glued,
Back together.
and blown to bits again long ago. Seeing they could not reach a conclusion anytime soon, told them we should head down first and then decide because time was running out. Only then did Tae-sung flash a satisfied smile.
He believed that since I wanted to go alone,
There must be incredible rewards down there. Only an idiot would pass up such a chance. But shortly after they headed down, they came running back up in a blind panic.
While running, you, Mihi, blamed Tae-sung.
Told you it would be dangerous down there?
Tae-sung roared back. How was I supposed to know?
Just as they had descended.
They saw something.
On a completely different level from the previous monsters.
30-meter-long giant serpent beast.
after running back up,
Tae-sung stole another glance down
He thought I must be insane.
to face such a monster alone. Meanwhile,
I watched the serpent.
it scrutinized me with its cold, predatory gaze.
Then,
It raised its head, large bulge forming in its throat. Seeing this posture, dove behind a stone pillar for cover.
and pressed my hands tightly over my ears.
the next second,
It opened its maw and unleashed a powerful red shockwave. The blast first hit where I had been standing, then swept forward toward the pillar where I was hiding.
had expected it to use this attack. Luckily,
Had chosen magic resistance earlier.
otherwise,
Would not have survived the aftershock. Knew well that this serpent could not only fire magical shockwaves, but also possessed incredibly hard scales. Ordinary swords could not leave a single scratch on it.
However,
Also knew exactly where its weakness was. With that thought, dashed out from behind the pillar.
Dodging a tail swipe with a quick maneuver.
Then leaped high into the air above it. Then plunged my short sword with all my might.
Under its scales.
Against the grain. Into its skin. The gaps between its scales are extremely vulnerable. Howling in pain. The great serpent let out a roar. Not having time to pull the sword out. Immediately retreated to a safe distance. But the wounded serpent was not about to let me off so easily. Recovering its senses, it lunged at me with an open maw. Again. Managed to sidestep the attack. The beast then raised its head. Eyes locked onto me. And spat out that red magical shockwave again. Although this strike did not hit me directly. Because I was covering my ears. My sensitivity.
So the surroundings had dropped significantly.
By the time its tail whipped around in front of me.
only just noticed it.
But it was already too late to dodge. Had no choice but to take the hit full on. The serpent thought this blow was enough to shatter my bones. But when the smoke cleared, saw that I had only sustained a small scratch on my head. This caused the beast to shudder involuntarily. Clearly, the attack did not have the intended effect. Looked at the spot where I had stabbed my sword. It was still bleeding profusely. Knew then that my poison was taking effect. While the serpent's physical defense was high, it had almost zero resistance to poison. However, due to its massive size, the poison on a single blade was far from enough.
Luckily,
had just taken 5 or 6 swords from them.
At this moment,
as I stood on the edge of life and death, the cold light in my blue eyes was sharper than any blade.
The giant serpent reared its head,
shaking the earth,
its crimson pupils crushing the last light of day.
Fangs glinted as a foul wind tore through the air.
Its flickering tongue was like a living noose,
strangling every breath.
In this instant, it felt as though the whole world
had become prey.
Vibrating within its throat, my spine was drawn tight like a bow.
And every inch of my trajectory was a gamble.
Would its maw crush my flesh, or would my blade tear open a crack in this desperate situation first? Meanwhile, on the floor above,
You, me, he, and the others
suddenly felt a violent tremor in the ground.
They had already run.
Quite a long distance from that place. They did not expect to still be able to hear the commotion. She could not help but worry if I could really handle this alone. Tae-sung saw her stop
and asked what she was doing,
telling her to hurry up. They were currently unarmed, so they intended to head back to the convenience store.
but you, me, he remained rooted to the spot.
Looking back toward me. After thinking it over, she turned and said she was going back for me. Tae-sung was fed up with being ignored and belittled by me.
And now even you, me, he was starting to ignore him.
A surge of fury consumed his heart. Helpless.
The two had no choice but to follow her back. When they got down and heard the noise I was making, she frantically called out, asking how I was, but when she saw the scene before her, she was struck speechless with horror. Because right now,
My arm was
clamped firmly in the giant serpent's jaws.